thank you to ROCS for having us to present this morning. So this morning, Clemens and I are addressing the subject of blockchain and how that connects with real estate and property, and we'll look at some of the possible permutations of how this may evolve, how this sector may evolve in the coming years. So out of interest, how many people here feel that Warren Buffett was spot on when he called Bitcoin rat poison squared? Might be interesting to take a little show of hands. Those who feel that cryptocurrency and blockchain are somewhat sort of back alley and shady, versus those who have got their Coinbase app and have been buying some Bitcoin or Ethereum. Anybody want to do a show of hands if you have a cryptocurrency app, Coinbase or something like that, and have used it? There's a brave individual at the front. So there we go. So that gives us a sense of where we are at. So we're going to address blockchain, if you like, from 30,000 feet, an overview, so that at the very least, when you are at your next dinner party, you can dazzle and entertain your host and hostess with the latest blockchain buzzwords. We'll think a little bit about what the key benefits are of blockchain, and then we'll look at how blockchain applies to property and real estate. And as James said, we are Rupert and Clemens from Protocol Partners. By background, we're from banking and big law. We've both worked in startups, launching our own startups in luxury e-commerce and in crowdfunding for non-profits. And more recently, we have been involved with blockchain. OXBC is the Oxford Blockchain Foundation, which is a professional association of business people and entrepreneurs who want to find out more about blockchain and pursue blockchain-related projects. Clemens and I helped to lead Smartlands in its launch of the first blockchain-based crowdfunding business in the UK, and that launched its first project in Nottingham this year successfully, and we'll come on to that in a little while. And Protocol Partners is our consulting firm. So an overview, first of all. Well, when Warren Buffett said that Bitcoin was rat poison squared, then he was making an observation about a particular cryptocurrency, not necessarily about blockchain as a whole. So you could say some apps in the App Store may in fact be a little bit suspect. You may download, for example, something related to Cambridge Analytica and have your data stolen. That doesn't mean necessarily that the underlying operating system for iOS, for Apple or for Android is itself a bit suspect. It just may mean that there are one or two projects that are riding on those rails that you may have question marks about. So certainly the cryptocurrency ecosystem over the last 2 or 3 years has made some headlines for unfortunate reasons, but hopefully you'll leave here this morning also at least asking a few questions around whether or not there are some interesting positives that are going to come over the coming years through blockchain. Now, this slide is our text-heavy slide for the morning, so you'll be grateful to know that after this we're going to get a little bit lighter, but this is a useful way of summarizing what blockchain is all about. So essentially, blockchain is a protocol. It's a digital framework or scheme. It's not really an application. It's the underlying operating system. And it is a protocol for digital ledger technology, for DLT, which is essentially a database, a digital database. Why is it a big noise? Why is it special? Because it's decentralized and distributed. And those are pretty core things, as we'll come to see in a few minutes. And it is secured by 3 C's, by consensus, cryptography, and cryptocurrencies. Consensus essentially means how does the blockchain agree that a transaction that has just happened is valid and true, and as long as 51% or whatever the governing mechanism of the blockchain is that agrees that the transaction is accurate, then it can be added to the chain. Cryptography is the way that these blockchains are encrypted to keep them secure, and cryptocurrencies, while they have headlines in their own right, sometimes for dubious reasons, they're essential to most blockchain projects because they act as an incentive to actually operate the blockchain in the way that it was designed to be operated, such that if you're using the blockchain, if you're using the cryptocurrency and the blockchain for a particular project, it will typically be against your interests to try and defraud other people on the blockchain. It will cost you more to defraud and misuse the blockchain than it will to use it appropriately. Now, there will be some examples where that hasn't been the case, but that's the essential movement and trajectory. And so far, the Bitcoin blockchain has never successfully been hacked, which underlines this principle that the incentives of the cryptocurrency actually keep the chain or the ledger working, secure and true. So as a result, the blockchain ledger system is an excellent system for transferring value. That's really what it's about. It's transferring value, and that value may be simply monetary value to you, moving a coin, moving cash, moving digital gold, if you like, or it may be moving valuable information. That information may be your social media messages, maybe songs or films. It may be title deeds and issues relating to real property. Some blockchains can also run code on them that automatically execute smart contracts, which is an interesting extra dimension that makes blockchains very innovative, and we'll come to that in a little while. So first of all, a blockchain is a ledger, a secure digital framework or protocol for creating and managing a ledger on a peer-to-peer network. Well, we've had ledgers for time immemorial. In fact, we've had ledgers going back for thousands of years, ledgers that were kept on clay tablets, on papyrus, ledgers kept on tally sticks. So back in the 17th or 16th century, you may have had a debt from, borrowed some money from a reputable individual, and that debt may have been recorded in medieval times on a tally stick. A piece of willow would have various indentations made on it. It would then be split in half, and the debt would be recorded on both sides of the piece of willow. And the debtor would have one side, the creditor would have another. Now, if you were owed £5, for example, I don't know, a trustworthy person, the Bishop of London, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and you had the tally stick showing that you were owed that money, then in fact you could use that tally stick as a form of currency and use that and spend it somewhere else. Somebody might give you the £5 and you would give them the tally stick. So we've had ledgers in different forms over the years. And then in the 16th century, the Medici family in Italy were the first to really popularize double entry bookkeeping, and thus effectively the limited company was born. Banking was born in the sense that we know it today. Databases, courtesy of Bill Gates, etc., have come along, and now the way that databases are innovating is through distributed ledger technology, or blockchains. So a blockchain is a protocol for a decentralized and a distributed ledger. Well, what does that mean? Well, the opposite of a decentralized and distributed ledger is a centralized ledger. Well, Wikipedia runs a ledger or a database of entries in its encyclopedia. If you want to get information from Wikipedia, you will go through the Wikipedia central server to draw down information from the database. And if you want to upload it, you will have to go through the central Wikipedia server to make edits or add a new section about yourself or your firm or whatever it is on Wikipedia, so that the public may know. Now, central systems for running our key ledgers or databases are at the heart of every institution, business, bank, government that we have contact with. So whether you're using your Visa or MasterCard today, or your bank account, or looking at your share trading account, dealing with title deeds, all of these work on a centralized ledger or centralized database. And then in 2005, we began to see some changes. Anybody recognize this old logo back from, go on, what is it?
Napster.
This is the Napster logo. Napster kicked off their business in 2005, and Napster was started by Sean Parker, who went on to become friends with Mark Zuckerberg and helped him turn Facebook into the giant that it's become today. But Sean Parker's first Rodeo was Napster, which allowed people to basically rip off songs from the music industry and share them with each other for free. So it was peer-to-peer software that was shared amongst all those that wanted to download it. And if you wanted to, for example, get hold of the latest Metallica album for free, then you could go onto the Napster system and it was decentralized around the world. And somebody, whether they're in Idaho or India or the Isle of Wight, would allow you to download the latest Metallica album from them. Well, that's an early example of a decentralized system. Naturally, Metallica was a little upset about this, and along with Sony Music and a few other giants from the music industry, they took Napster to court to say that their copyrights were being pirated and infringed, and that they were owed $136 million or whatever it was. And I think Napster probably had about $136, and they quickly went bankrupt and were folded. And their argument in their defense was, well, look, we haven't done anything. We've decentralized this music through our peer-to-peer software. And in fact, when the Metallica album was downloaded, it was actually downloaded from the Isle of Wight, not from the Napster central server, which was quite a good argument and nearly saved them. But when they looked a little bit more closely, the problem with Napster was that the index, or the discovery mechanism for finding out where you could find the latest Metallica album was actually on Napster's central server. So even though the software was distributed on a peer-to-peer basis and was decentralized, the discovery element was in fact centralized in Silicon Valley on Napster's servers, and they went bankrupt swiftly after that was made clear. Well, people then left Napster and went in this direction. This is BitTorrent. So BitTorrent became the replacement for Napster to allow people to share films, movies, music, whatever it might be. And at its peak, it's thought that BitTorrent was accounting for up to 50% of all internet usage. So while we may not have made much use of it, there were a lot of teenagers around the world who were making use of BitTorrent to share music and movies with each other. And a lot of people from the entertainment industry tried to sue BitTorrent, and their defense was, well, look, this is distributed, decentralized, peer-to-peer software, and we're not, in fact, allowing anyone to download anything. We've simply written software that allows people to share anything. If they choose to get hold of a pirate copy of the Metallica album, that's nothing to do with us. And so, of course, they then looked at, well, is BitTorrent running a centralized index where people can search what's on the BitTorrent network? And they weren't. They'd also decentralized their index so that anybody around the world could also create a sort of a Google search type interface for you to be able to have a look and find your latest movie or album without having to go directly to the BitTorrent company servers. So the software was open source and distributed, decentralized, and separate to the company itself. And in fact, they were never successfully sued. In the end, they disappeared, and we don't really know who they are because iTunes launched and Spotify launched. And even though they charged money for the music and movies, they did a much better job. And so people were happy to start paying. But nevertheless, they're a good example of a decentralized database of music and movies. Well, we moved from 2005 to 2008, and the move from centralization to decentralization and then to distribution began to go further. So 15th of September, we probably all remember where we were on that day, or approximately, when Lehman's collapsed, and a highly centralized financial system looked like it was on the verge of toppling over completely. Well, it was only about 6 weeks after that that a mysterious figure called Satoshi Nakamoto published to the internet his famous Bitcoin white paper. And he says at the beginning, it's a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution, without being centralized. This is only about 8 pages long, and you can find this easily, and it goes into technical detail about what he's done. But this became Bitcoin, and as I said, Bitcoin, which started out possibly being worth in total a couple of dollars, has become an electronic store of value, maybe not cash. Some people say it's more like digital gold, but it's not been hacked, and it has allowed people to transfer value between each other, peer to peer, with no central institution. And as I said, that value could be cash, but it could be, for example, a title deed. So here is a diagram that shows the evolution from centralization to decentralization and then to distribution. And so what's interesting about this last picture on the right, the distributed system, is that it represents the fact that every node there, every computer that is running the software, is running a full and identical copy of the entire system. So, for example, if this was the Visa MasterCard system, the software would be open source, and every single node would represent every single transaction that was happening on the Visa MasterCard system. And they would only be updated when the network as a whole reached consensus that each transaction was true. And all of us would be participants on that, being able to send value, money to each other without any intermediary in the middle, either slowing things down or taking some rent from us on our way through. So it's a unique system of record keeping, and it is what makes blockchain unique. So the benefits of blockchain, the benefits of this distributed system, well, it allows for what's called trustlessness, resilience, immutability, and sensor resistance. These are all good dinner party buzzwords. If you never use a cryptocurrency app or never use the blockchain, hopefully you'll leave with a few more key words. What does it mean to be trustless? Initially, that sounds like a negative. For something to be trustless sounds like it's not trustworthy. But the point is, this system allows for the disintermediation of trusted intermediaries. So here is a diagram of the Visa MasterCard system. The card holder on the left wants to send $100 to somebody, to a merchant, but he has to go through the issuer who issued his card, in this case Capital One, that then takes the payment through the Visa MasterCard system, then through the acquirer, and the acquirer is the one that gave the card reading machine and the card software to the shop, and then eventually to the shop. So the shop, the payer pays $100, but the shop receives $97.25. So that's a classic system where there are intermediaries who are effectively taking rent from the system and making the system more expensive. And the blockchain would allow a payment to go directly from, on a peer-to-peer basis, from the cardholder to the merchant at a much reduced cost. So it enables there to be a relationship where you don't need the trusted intermediary. You're able to carry out what might be termed a trustless transaction, where the blockchain provides the trust for you rather than Visa MasterCard providing the trust basis for you. Secondly, it allows for amazing resilience. Now, in this country, we don't worry necessarily too much about our centralized systems going underwater, from fire and flood and acts of God, because there's normally redundancy built in. But if there was a huge catastrophe and a centralized system maybe only had 3 or 4 levels of redundancy, 3 or 4 different server warehouses, there is potential for your data, your value, to be eradicated. On a blockchain system where all the data is copied across all the hundreds or thousands of nodes, then there's enormous resilience against disaster. Thirdly, blockchain provides immutability, basically trustworthiness, a source of truth. Because it's cryptographically secured through deep encryption, because of the requirement for there to be consensus across the chain. A transaction can only be added to the chain when there is consensus across all the participants that are running the software. And because of the cryptocurrency that incentivizes you to play by the rules rather than trying to go around the rules, you end up with a very secure system, a reliable source of truth. Now, Again, that may not mean too much to us, where we are, on the whole, trusting our centralised sources of truth, our banks and our governments, our land registries. But if you're in a place where that's not the case, then actually having a system that doesn't rely on the goodwill of the centralised authority, for example, Venezuela, where, of course, there's been ridiculous inflation and potentially devastating corruption, well, that has sucked the lifeblood out of people's personal savings and the economy as a whole. So if there was a system that was decentralized and couldn't be tampered with by the powers that be, then that would be a powerful thing. You can imagine there are some countries where the land registry is open to corruption, or perhaps just purely open to error. Think of what's been going on in Zimbabwe, where land has been reappropriated in different ways. Well, what if there was a distributed database for the Zimbabwean land registry, where you'd always be able to go back and say, look, my title deed is represented here, and it shows clearly that I own this property, rather than the centralized body being able to go in to the database and amend it against your will and against your interests. So those are some key values that blockchain brings.